well, today is day 13 or 14, I think, of my marathon training for the Twin Cities, October 4, which is the reason why I'm doing this entire little video blog. Let's be brutally honest. After my last, I think it was a 3 or 4 mile run, later that day on Tuesday, I started getting some problems which are pretty indicative of somebody who overpronates like me. First off, my shin splints were continuing to nag me. And second off, I started feeling some pain in my hip, which has to do with something they call iliotibial band syndrome, or ITB. And I was kind of not in a ton of pain, but just a nagging pain on the hip. And I thought one of the things I probably need to do is go buy a pair of shoes, which I did. I got a pair of Asics Kyanos, which we'll talk about in an upcoming show. But I want to kind of focus on the injury part, because there are things that you need to do when you end up with an injury. And one of the little acronyms they come up with is called RICE, which abbreviated stands for rest, ice, compression, and elevation. So those are 4 things that you can typically do with a lot of your injuries. First off, take a day or 2 off, maybe even a week, depending on how bad the injury is. Second off, you want to ice your injury to get the swelling down. Third, compression. Sometimes compressing the muscle keeps things grouped together so that they won't rub. And then last is elevation, just putting your feet or your legs or whatever part is aching, just kind of elevate it up to help with blood flow. So I'm going to show you a couple of different icing techniques that you can use, which hopefully will help you. And all of this that I'm about to show you can be done for probably $6 or less. So let's take a look at some of the methods that you can use. So one of the techniques that you can use actually is kind of a combination of some old vegetables that you can store and an ACE bandage. And I'm hoping that you can see this and how I'm doing it. But really, let's say I've got the shin splint here. You basically just take your ACE bandage and you can quickly wrap that ACE, and I'm not going to get this super tight just for purposes of showing you, but you can use your ACE bandage to basically wrap things around like so, and then you can just let that sit there for maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes depending on the injury, and that ice on the skin again is going to bring down the swelling, which will help. Now another thing that you can use using the ice format also is basically purchasing a pack of Dixie cups. These are, I think, $3 for a pack of 50 or so. Fill it with water, and then when you're done, you end up with basically a little ice formation, for lack of a better term, and then you can give yourself an ice massage. So, for example, we would just apply the ice directly to the skin. Watch out for frostbite. But again, you could rub this across the skin, kind of give yourself a little ice massage. And again, this would be really good to do after you're running, just to kind of keep the swelling down. And I'd recommend probably getting a towel or something to put underneath so that when the ice melts, the water will pool into the towel rather than on the carpeting. So all are great methods to help recuperate. But again, let's hope that you're not a victim of any injuries, and you're lucky like I was today. Hopefully, I guess we'll find out tomorrow about how bad the hip or the shin splints might get. But again, rest, ice, compression, elevation. The RICE acronym is a great way to help out with some injuries. So until then, we will see you next time on the trails.